Okay, good afternoon and welcome to the Fireside Chat with Emmanuel Ligner, Global CEO and President of Cytiva, formerly GE Healthcare Life Sciences. My name is Ryan Shepard from RGF Executive Search, and I'll be your host this evening. Emmanuel, it's great to have you here. I've been looking forward to getting to know you and more about Cytiva and the industry, and it's great to have you here today. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you, Ryan. It's always a pleasure. As you know, I spent 10 years in my life in Japan, and when you and your team reach out and ask to share experience, this is something that I always want to do. So, as I was saying, you arrive to an age where people are interested to talk about you and listen about your career and your way of leading and what you're doing. So it's felt good.
Great. So, Emmanuel, tell us more about yourself and especially Cytiva. It's a new name, rebranded this year. Tell us more about that so that we can bring our audience up to speed with who you are and who is Cytiva.
Sure. So, Cytiva is a new company. Okay, we are just 6 months old as a brand name, but in fact our history can be traced back to 1733 with a British company named Watman International. So we have an extremely long history. We are global leaders in the life science industry. We have about 8,000 associates around the world. Run more than 40 countries, and we have a turnover which is, I mean, publicly when we sold the business, it was announced around $3 billion. It's slightly more than that now. This company has an incredible legacy of innovation. We are providing to the researcher, but also the people that developed and the people that manufacture drugs, all the tools, equipment, but also consumables to actually understand the disease and find a potential cure. And we are really specialists around the protein, recombinant protein, monoclonal antibody, vaccine, but also the new medicines, new modalities which are emerging those days, like cell and gene therapies, for example. So we are engaged with research academy, with translational institution, with very small biotech, and of course, very large biopharmaceutical companies. So we have a very broad range of customers. We do business direct, we do business indirect. We have extremely small product that cost a few cents, and we are able to actually build a whole factory from the ground, as we are doing right now for our customers in China, and that factory will be $100+ million. So it's a very diverse, I would say, company. It's fascinating. It goes extremely fast. We have been acquiring all the times on innovation, and we'll talk a bit more about that later. But it's just a phenomenal business. I'm so passionate about it because what we do really matters. When you are supplying the industry with critical raw materials to manufacturing vaccine and anti-cancer drugs and anti-rheumatitis product, what you do really matters. And we spend a lot of time with the leadership team to bring the patient at the center of what we are doing. If Cytiva was not supplying, the world will not have insulin, will not have vaccine for children, will not have anti-cancer drugs, will not have growth hormone, will not have anti-platelet agent for the hemophilic, and so on and so forth. So it's a really broad range of products that we are helping to develop and manufacture, and this sense of purpose is very important for us.
Fantastic. And tell me more about some of these new therapies that are emerging, biologics, monoclonal antibodies. How can you give us, for those who maybe aren't scientists, a depiction of this landscape of the new therapies that are emerging? What does that mean?
Sure. It means that basically some diseases are cured. All right, and I think this is very important to think about. When you think about until now, there were some diseases where you basically extend life. Today, with the new modalities, the new therapies, you actually, in very often some cases, you cure the disease. And this is a big change. This is a major change. And I'm thinking in particular around gene therapy, when some diseases which are genetically deficiencies, let's take an example. We are talking about hemophilia. Okay, so you have a gene deficiency around the production of platelets, which are going to stop you bleeding. Well, there's a few pharmaceutical companies, a few biotech, which are actually developing gene therapy, where basically using a viral vectors, a small virus, if you want, that is going to carry the gene and the gene modification tools, I would say. It's enter your body, it's enter your cells, it modify your gene and your ADN, if you want, back to what it should be, and suddenly you can produce your platelet again. So there's a company in America called BioMarin on the West Coast, which have actually filed to the FDA a gene therapy against hemophilia. And this is just really, really incredible, because it could potentially change the life of millions of people. So you are very exciting when you work for Cytiva and when you help company like this to again develop and research, develop and manufacturing those therapy. If we think about protein, Japan has been a pioneer in research. Professor Honjo from Kyoto University has developed and have got a Nobel Prize for one of the new therapy, I would say, in cancer research. When you have a cancer, the tumor is smart enough to develop its own defense mechanisms against your own immune system. Normally, your white blood cell is going to eat those degenerating cells. Well, a tumor actually developed inhibitors. So on the surface, it develops some small protein-based system that tells to the white cell, no, don't eat me, and I'm perfectly fine. Of course, it's not fine. Of course, the tumor is degenerating. It's your cell which have degenerated, but the white blood cell is not attacking your tumors. And so what Professor Honjo has found is that if you put some inhibitors around the tumors, suddenly your immune system is attacking the tumor again. And so it's called, it's your own immune system which is going to attack your tumor. So it's something which is new, and of course, a Japanese company and international company have been developing those anti-PD-L1, immune checkpoint inhibitor immune therapies, and it's working very well. And so there's a lot of evolution which is happening. And again, Cytiva has been part of the research, development, and manufacturing of those new therapies. So it's really antibody and recombinant protein is not something new, but it's something which is accelerating really today, and it's making a lot of progress in modern medicines, I would say. The same way that gene and cell therapy is going to become really something important over the next 10, 15 years.
Absolutely. And of course, with coronavirus upon us this year, it's launching a whole new sense of urgency to what was already a very urgent purpose, to get products to market for patients. How has that coronavirus being thrust into the situation increased the urgency? How has that impacted the sense of urgency in day-to-day business for Cytiva in the industry?
Yes, it's actually a very good question, Ryan, because we've seen a total different pace. Let's put things in perspective. There is today globally 1,200 programs to find either a diagnostic, a cure, a treatment, or a vaccine for COVID-19. 1,200 programs. So over the last 6 months, more or less, a bit more, 9 months maybe today, we have had a huge amount of people looking to do something about COVID in the industry. Just to put things back in perspective, Ebola over a period of 40 years, have no more than 250 projects. Over 40 years. And AIDS, HIV, has about another 1,200 programs, but again, over a period of 40 years. So you could see that speed and the global aspect of it. This is, I think, something that is too very important. Everybody around the world, every modern institute, every large or small pharmaceutical company is trying to do something about COVID, which has never been the case before. So that global action is very important. And secondly is the speed. We have today 6 or 7 vaccine, about 2 to 3 therapy, which are already in phase 3 clinical development after 8 months. This is unprecedented. And it's possible because of the focus that was put on, but also because of the regulators. There's a very important aspect of the role of COSECHO or FDA or European medical agencies, medicine agencies, which have actually took the stance to really work and review the file and the ethical clinical program and give the thumbs up to everybody extremely fast. So there's a prioritization which has been done behind. I think we don't know yet what's the impact for the future, but there's no doubt the world has demonstrated that when we want to go fast, we can go fast. And usually this is an industry, Ryan, that everything goes extremely slow. Okay, to develop the vaccine, usually it's 10 years. And during your phase 1 and your phase 3, it's no more than 5 or 6 years. Well, we do everything extremely strongly and fast now. So which means for a supplier like us, it's a new paradigm. It's you need to be very agile. You have customers which is just finishing phase 1, already building capacity to manufacture at scale as approved. And this is totally new in the industry. So it put a lot of pressure on us because suddenly we have to supply and manufacture much more. We need to be extremely quick and extremely agile. And not only us, of course, our supplier or other supplier, and of course CRO, which provides services to the pharmaceutical industry and so on and so forth. So we are in a, if you want, in the past, we were driving at 200 kilometers and now it's 400 kilometers. And this is really kind of, it's really an adrenaline rush right now. And everybody needs to do it. And on top of it, we do it remotely. On top of it, we can't travel around the world. On top of it, we have suddenly to, the trust factor has to be multiplied by 4 or 5. We are right now investing a huge amount of money into additional capacity of production in various plants around the world. Well, you know, as a CEO, usually you like to go, you like to check, you like to shake hands with the project managers and the project leaders, and give them a good pat on the back and motivate them and explain them that what they're doing is extremely important. You can't do this those days. I mean, you can do it, but only remotely, which is something that we all have to learn. And it's so not only the business is going extremely fast, but you have to do things a new way. And this is creating additional challenge on everybody, I think.
Well, there's clearly so many dynamics to this situation. I want to start with the people factor. As you say, when we want to come together and go fast, we can. But to do that, we need the right people. Tell us more about how do you characterize the talent gap? What does that mean? And what are some tangible impacts on patients that really illustrate the importance of the talent gap?
I think the talent gap is first of all global. Okay, I think there's no particular region around the world which have a huge pool of talent. This year we're looking at recruiting probably between 800 to 900 people. It's probably more recruitment that we've never done over a short period like this. And when we look at what the talents are there, and by the way, we're not the only one recruiting. The whole industry is recruiting. So there's a short pool of talent. There's a gap there. I will say we are still in a society where IQ is more important than EQ. And I think when we look at what we have to do those days, especially in those incredible moments, we are looking at more EQ than IQ. And it's a bit characterizing if you want, but I will prefer someone which is able to have a lot of empathy, which are able to communicate extremely well, able to listen extremely well, rather than that someone that can do a mathematical problem extremely fast. Okay, there's great tools now for that, but there's no tools to be able to have enough empathy, and that empathy goes through a small camera on top of your computer. And so this is where I think that the whole society needs to evolve. The education needs to evolve, and therefore this is what it's create a bit of talent gap. But the talent gap, I think, generally speaking, is also driven by the fact that this is a unique industry, a very niche industry, an industry where that goes extremely fast, that is recruiting extremely fast, and that create that talent gap pool. But I think that this IQ versus EQ is very, very important. And in a pandemic situation right now, when you look at your leaders, you want to have leaders that have empathy. You really want to have leaders that understand how stressful it is to work at home, to have your kids running around. You need to understand that it is stressful because some of your people do not have an office at home. Some of our people have been working for 3 months with a laptop on their legs in their bedrooms, and so you cannot put enough attention right now on making sure that you need to understand what happened in your enterprise, in your companies, as a human level. The other thing for recruiting, we are recruiting people right now, and we are recruiting them remotely. You need to be able to interview remotely. You need to be able to, maybe I prefer to have a phone call first than having a face-to-face, because you can cut the unconscious bias that maybe you could see on some face, or around colors, around everything else. So phone call first, then a web chat, for example. And those people, what we are recruiting, extremely hard for them. They don't come to an office. They don't have this kind of onboarding process that we usually have. It's all remote. And so you need to be very, very creative about it. But again, if you put the human being at the center of what you do, and if you really think about the human being before to think about the process, or before to think about what that person need to know or need to learn, I think it works well.
Yeah, it's such an interesting point. IQ versus EQ. Empathy is a word that's discussed so much recently. And of course, that can vary how you assess empathy from culture to culture. You've been in Japan, you've been in Europe, currently in the UK, having a very global view. So how, from a multicultural angle, how would you, or what kind of tips would you give to interviewers out there who are trying to assess EQ across cultures? And secondarily, what are some questions that the leaders of tomorrow who are out there listening right now could ask themselves to just reflect on how well they're developing their own sense of urgency? Tips to interviews and tips to the interviewees, leaders of tomorrow.
Yeah, it's a good question. Tips on interview. I think that empathy and people centricity and emotional intelligence don't matter much by the culture. It's probably harder to get beyond the Japanese, I will say, kind of difficulty to be really themselves. That's for sure. It takes a bit more time, but you know, being respectful of someone during an interview it's the same if you interview a Japanese, an American, or a French. There's different cultural trend, and the first tip that I will say is just make sure that you understand those different trends. You understand the fundamental differences of culture. The fact that an American is, and this is a big cliche, right? But generally, an American is much more using emphatic word about everything. You know, it's awesome, it's incredible, it's phenomenal. You know, this is just a bit more wordy, where French is a bit more criticizing, it's a bit more cynical, I will say, and I am one of them. Where Japanese is very much more factual orientated and much more short answer, very factual orientated, and will have more harder time to speak about himself. The way that I interview, I always start about me. I always first of all, what I'm going to say is I'm going to say what we have 1 hour. I'm going to introduce myself briefly. I want you to introduce yourself briefly, and then we enter into a discussion. And then at the end, I will give you at least 10 to 15 minutes to ask me questions. I set up the scene of the way that the interview will go, and I ask the person that I'm interviewing if this is okay. So the first things that you're trying to do is make them relax. All right, tell them how it's going to happen, so that you don't jump right away on your resume and say, what did you do in 1993 in this company? Because this is kind of a stress. So you set the scene. Okay. The second thing is you start with your own self. So it gives people they feel a bit more relaxed because they know who they are talking to. And what is very interesting is I also observe, when you introduce yourself, you're going to do it in a certain way, and most of the people are going to mimic the way that you're presenting yourself. And this is another thing that I am observing. Is the person is listening, is the person is going to mimic the way that I've introduced myself. And again, that 5-10 first minutes, which they don't have to talk, makes them confident. You give them some confidence time. And this is very important. And then as you have told them that once they've introduced yourself, you want to have a conversation, suddenly it's not an interview anymore. So you try to set up the person into an environment which is non-stressful. We have all interview, and we all know that those interviews can be extremely stressful. Sometimes you're under pressure because either you hate your job or you don't have job, etc., etc., etc. So you have to make sure that the person is in a setting which is appropriate. And the other tip that I would give is, let's make sure that you don't make decision after 30 minutes. So we always have 3-4 different interviews, and you can choose the type of interviews that you do. You can ask about the person experience, and then the next time you can ask the candidate to think about an issue and come with a solution and make a more presentation type of interview, or you can do something which is much more about evidence-based. Tell me when you had to change an organization. Let's go through the detail of your own experience, but tell me a story if you want. One interview is not enough. And I would say one interviewer is not enough as well. Again, this is something that we do a lot in Cytiva. We make sure that it's not only the CEO is going to make the decision, but of course the HR leader is very important. Some colleagues is very important. I've had 3 or 4 interviews with some people, and then I took them for dinner when we could have dinner together and when we could travel. That is something which is also important. See the person into a different environment. But go back to the culture. Again, you can do exactly the same thing in multiple culture. Just be aware of those different trends about the culture, even if they are cliche. That might help you to understand a bit more about the way that one person from Japan might answer the same answer differently than someone from France or from Europe or from the US.
Great. So basically, keep up with the trends and understand the global landscape of different cultures. Set the scene in the interview so that the interviewee feels comfortable, and see how attentive they are to your behavior and how aware they are. Now, of course, any life science organization is going to need to find the right IQ, the right technical skills as well. And it's something that many of the clients who are watching right now, then one of their pain points is not being able to find the right people with the right skills and in the right amount of time as well. So what advice would you give to other organizations, particularly smaller organizations that don't have the mobility of talent internally, like a Cytiva, for example, on what are the most effective ways that you found to attract, to recruit the technical skills that you need?
You know, Ryan, the first thing that we have to think about is retaining. You have first to retain your talent, all right? And if you retain your talent, maybe you have less search to do. So retention is very, very important, making sure you set up the right culture internally. And why I say that, it's because a lot of the talent recruitment may also happen based on reference. Okay, so use your current talent pool to generate some external attractiveness. You don't have better advertising, better source than your 10 or 15 talents that come from many different universities. Give them an incentive to bring new talents. We do that all the time. We set up a referral incentive program where your own employee are going to bring you ex-colleagues, ex-friends in university, alumni, people that they know, or, you know, again, colleagues from different industries. So again, if you set up the right culture internally, first you have less mover, therefore less recruitment to do. And secondly, they can be a phenomenal source. All right, this is just very, very important. And then after, there's something which is very important. And we are going through this right now. We are a 6 months old company, but as I said, which have a 200+ years history. When you are labeled GE Life Sciences, you can recruit. When you are labeled Cytiva, well, many people don't know us or don't associate life science, GE Life Science to Cytiva. And so don't be afraid to spend money on your brand. Don't be afraid to do this type of exercise that we're doing right now, because it's a part of the PR, okay, exercise. Use social media. I mean, today, social media is a phenomenal source of recruit, a phenomenal source of PR, and you cannot avoid it, but use it in the right way. Also, do things differently. And I know maybe for the Japanese audience, it's something that sounds maybe stupid to say, but go and recruit directly at university. A lot of European and American-based companies do not do this. Do not do this. So we are today setting a program in China and in different places around the world where we make sure that we have a strong presence in the university and we recruit freshers. It's maybe a bit more challenging, and you know that it takes longer times maybe to have them productive, but it's a good bet. And I would say you can have people which are maybe ready to be much more loyal as well. Okay, and again, in Japan, this is a way of practice. This is a way that it has been done for a long time, where you go and recruit every year a certain set of freshers, and you bring them, and you have your Shinjin Kenshu, your new employee education program, and so on. And this worked pretty well. This is something that was not done in other countries around the world, and this is something that we are trying to bring, again, because it's slightly easier to recruit and slightly faster to recruit. The other very important things when you are a global, international, multinational, one of the source of talent is on the acquisition you are making. So again, when we make acquisition, make sure that you keep those talents and make sure that your own culture is flexible enough to welcome those talents, to find the right environment for them, to give them time to learn your culture, learn your way of doing things. And you know what it is when you join a company, there's so many acronyms, there's so many, everybody seems to know everybody, and and everybody knows, and then there's a problem, who to talk to, and etc. But when you just join from an acquisition, and I've been acquired, you just look around and you say, what the hell is going on here? And so you need times, you need support. So give support to the people that you are acquiring, because again, those are massive pool of talent. And one of the most recent acquisition we've done was a very small startup with 20 people. So you buy a startup with 20 people and suddenly they join a company, and at that time it was GE, which was 330,000 employees. I mean, I can tell you they might feel lost. So plan for it. Give them mentors, give them point of contact. Don't sweat it from an acquirer standpoint, but just make sure you give them the right support. And today, I have to say that especially the leadership of that small team is still with us. And I really appreciate that, because those guys help your culture. They bring a new way of thinking, they bring a fresh pair of eyes. And if you have a mentality to constantly get better, and this is really some of the things which is my motto around, let's get better every day, little step by step. It's a bit of a Kaizen way of thinking, or continuous improvement if you want. You need to welcome people from outside, either as recruit or as an acquisition, to help you to get better. So I will say, keep your people, use them, use your own internal people. They are the best advocate you can have. Do things differently, go and recruit in university rather than trying to fight for the same best talent, which is working in competitors, for example. And make sure that you keep the people that you are buying through acquisition, because that can be very helpful.
Excellent. Thank you, Emmanuel. And speaking of Kaizen, 2020 really is a year of Kaizen for all of us all around the world. I want to zoom in now to our Japan audience. We have folks watching who have worked with you in the past, as well as those who haven't, but really look up to leaders like yourself who bring a global perspective. What advice would you give to those leaders out there who want to step up, who want to be the general manager of tomorrow, the country manager of tomorrow? Now that really this year is a chance to change and develop new skills, what do you think are some of those skills that are really going to be indispensable in the new future? And what would be your advice, knowing Japanese people, to work on to become a leader in the future in this industry?
Thank you, Ryan. It's a very good question. I think that first of all, the first thing that I said to people is, don't sweat it. Okay. Having ambition is great, but if you don't have the ambition, and if you just want to do what you're doing right now and you're happy about it, hallelujah. All right. I think this is very important. And I think we as leaders should not put pressure on people and say, you need to have a career, you need to move job every 2 years or every 3 years, because that may make people miserable. So first of all, really the thing is, if you love your job right now, and if you're happy in your job and you have a very good balance, life balance and so on, don't look after a promotion. If you're happy, we will be happy as well, all right, as a leaders and a structure. So that is very important. First of all, because there is a pyramid and we may not have opportunity for everybody, all right? And so this is very important. As we want to keep people, the first thing that I tell to my leader is making sure that your people, your managers and your managers' are happy and are, fulfilling their dream and the well-balanced well-being. I think those days is very, very important. So saying that, if you have the ambition to take my job, well, come and get it, first of all. But secondly, understand what's the consequence. Understand what are the sacrifices. That is very, very important. Don't dream about having a big paycheck, because a big paycheck do not come like this. I think that I'm potentially screwing the future of my children because I don't spend enough time with them. I may be screwing my health because I have spent 20 years traveling 70% of the time and spending time in airplane and in lounge eating some crappy food. I have moved already 11 times. My children are 14 years old. They have been already to 5 different schools. It's a huge sacrifice that you have to make. And you need to understand, if this is, you still want that, fine, but just understand what you want. And so the big things that I have for Japanese leaders today that wants to grow is, you have to pack and you have to leave and you have to go into different experiences around the world. And you need to be ready to do it. You need to be ready to be sent to China. You need to be ready to be sent to America. And it's not easy. My wife is Japanese, and when we left Japan, she didn't speak a word of English. And she arrived in a little town in Kent, in South England. And she had learned some American English, so the British English and the typical British accent. She didn't understand a word. We spent 4 years, and then she moved to the US, and she arrived in Princeton. And actually, this is where she fucking didn't understand English and started to speak English, because she was speaking with Mexicanos, with Indian, with Chinese, which has bad English as well. But suddenly she could feel that she could do it. So but it's stressful. It's extremely stressful. And you know, you go back home sometimes and there's tears and there's regrets, and you need to manage through that. And you have been stressed at work, and you go back home, you've been stressed as well. So it's okay. It's possible, but just understand what you are taking. And again, Japan has some phenomenal values, and I always say that I will not be in the job today if I didn't spend 10 years of my life in Japan working for Otsuka and working for Abbott. I learned a ton of things. I learned patience. I learned, you know, empathy. I learned to be respectful of each other. Japan is an incredible place to learn those skill sets. But I knew that I needed to go out of Japan and do other things to become a global leader. And I think today we see some global leaders failing because they come with one culture mindset. So you really need to have a multicultural mindset those days. And this is why the first advice will be pack. The second advice is, don't be afraid to take a job that you don't feel you have the skills for. Okay, I have always taken a job with a butterfly in my stomach, feeling, will I make it? Will I be capable of? Okay, if you don't have that worry, you're going to fail. But if you have that worry, you work twice as hard not to fail. I think this is very important. Of course, you need to have some self-confidence. But you need to have a balance between your self-confidence and your willingness to learn. And I think this is another very important thing. Do not afraid to take a job which is a de-learning and a relearning. We look at those skills today. We look at the skills of people which were doing A for 2, 3, 5 years and able to move from A to Z and learn it very quickly and be efficient extremely quickly. I can give you an example. So I spent 10 years of my life in pharma, in diagnostic, and then I spent another something like 7, 8 years in life sciences. And then my boss came to see me and say, hey, by the way, I want you to go to pharmaceutical diagnostic and lead the pharmaceutical diagnostic. And for me, I've done it. I've been in diagnostic, I've been in drugs, I know what it is, and I was absolutely no way. I'm not going back there. It's not that I don't like it, but it's just I prefer to stay in the bioprocessing. And if I had not done it, I will not be here today. So again, you know, my first reaction was no, and then after, I realized that I needed to demonstrate it that I could do something completely differently. And that was what my boss was expecting. It was in his succession plan, and it took 2 leaders on both sides, and he trusted us. You know, one went to bioprocess from the pharmaceutical diagnostic, and one from bioprocess to, from pharma to bioprocess, and from bioprocess to pharma. And it was just, okay, guys, you know, show me that you can de-learn, relearn, and be successful. So the world is going to move extremely fast today. The world is getting really global. So understand the consequence if you want to have a career. on your personal life, on your well-being. Understand that it's about multicultural aspect. It's about experience. It's not about what you've studied. It's not about your diploma. I am not a Harvard graduate. I'm not a haute école graduate in France or Todai or Keio University. No, I am not. I'm from a normal university in countryside of France. What made me a leader is my experience. So it is about the experience. And third point, don't be afraid to take a job that scared you and where you will have to de-learn and relearn. Those will be the three things that I could advise to our audience.
Thank you. And with today's environment now really being work from home, many companies are new to this, but some like Cytiva have been having a remote work culture for some time already. Tell us more about Cytiva's remote work culture and what are some practical best practices you have for people to stand out and take risks and perform and be seen and be on that global stage more despite limited business travel and working remotely.
It's interesting, Ryan, because I think that yes, we had a culture of remote business practice before, but just put things in perspective. We were spending $1.6 million per week on T&L, on travel. All right. So we still we're doing a lot of face-to-face stuff. And from one day to another, we had to do two things actually, because it's very interesting to think about remote, because we are here among managers and on leaders. And yes, the leader had to stay still, but all the frontline worker in factories, we never shut a factory. They had to go. So I think it's very important to understand that within a Cytiva, an 8,000 employee company, a good 3,000 or close to 4,000 employees, their life didn't change. They still had to get in the car or get in the train or get in the bicycle every day and go to the factory because we could not shut down a factory. So the crisis for us was first make sure we manage the safety of our employee. That was absolutely fine. That was just super important. And the great things about it is that we had a plant in China. And so very, very early on, we learned what we need to do in China and we just copy and paste. And as the pandemic was going from east to west, we just follow the pandemic, and then our German plant, and then our Swedish plant, and then our American plant, just kind of benefiting from what happened in China. So the trick on the remote is multiple. First of all, it's very easy when you work from home to start at 7:30 in the morning and go on until 2100, okay, at night, because you're home and you just turn on your computer and you jump onto meetings, and people are also putting a lot more calendar easily. Let's have a team meeting, let's have a Zoom meeting. It's very, very easy. So what happened is you end up in front of your computer 13, 14 hours a day, and that's not good for your well-being. All right. And so the first thing that we did is we very quickly made communication about how do you still manage your calendars, how to do stuff. So first of all, don't be afraid to refuse. All right. If you think that you are not going to add any value, or if you think that this meeting is not important, do not attend. And when you are the CEO and you say a video and you say that to people, it's okay to say no. That's very important. The second thing is make sure that in your calendar, you block sometimes for yourself. All right. And ask your assistant to do it, or just do it yourself. Just put, I'm busy here. You don't have to tell anybody what you're doing, but maybe it's an hour for you to get out and take a walk, or, go in your garage and train on your gym, or just go and play with your kids. Okay, that is very, very important. The second thing is when you have a team meeting, and if you have your child that comes and sit on your lap, it's fine. This is the other thing, is people just normal, they shout, they put themselves in mute, and you can see that they shout, and it's okay for you as a leader to say, no, 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 let her in, let him in, just bring it in and say a few words to the child of your employee. Just, again, show humanity. It's okay. Again, you have some little things like this that it's not a normal environment, so accept something different. You will not, we are not used to have children running around in the office, for sure. But you are in a remote situation, it is okay.